I wanted to go over the residential purchase agreement. There's some new forms. New forms every year, pretty much, and by December, the California Association of Realtors revises its form. If you've never sold a house, then you may not know what the other form looked like, right? So this won't be a new form. It'll just be a form. And what I want to do is go through the process of how do you fill it out and how does all that work and all that sort of stuff. So car.org, there is a desktop version of Zip Forms. It's much better to use the online version. The obvious advantage of having the desktop version is that you could actually fill out a form when you weren't online. However, doing a lot with it is I don't have the desktop. I haven't had the desktop version on my computer for more than a decade, but you could have it. And one of the advantages of having the online version is that when they update forms, it's going to automatically update the forms. So what I thought I would start out with is, you can see I have a bunch of test ones. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a template. Does that sound like fun? And I'm not going to go through every line, but it's a good thing to do. And what we're going to do is you're going to go over here where it says new, and you're going to click on new transaction. And what I'm doing is the residential purchase agreement first. So we're going to call this a, how about a BUYERTEMPLATE? That's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to click on purchase, and I'm going to click on residential. And notice it says here apply template. Apparently I've already created one, or somebody did. Must be me, because nobody else ever does this but me. It says agent buyer. I don't remember doing that. But anyhow, I'm going to click on save. And so what it's done is it's created a contract that's called template. The first thing you're going to want to do when you create a template is add the cover sheet. Once you've added the cover sheet, you want to open up the cover sheet, and you want to go down to where it says selling broker information, and you want to fill out this section, right? Which means the selling broker firm name, Keller Williams, Silicon City, KW Silicon City. So I'm going to just get you started. KW Silicon City. The street address, you put that in. You get the office BRE number, which I have not memorized, but Laura and Opie would know. You put in the state, the zip. I don't bother with the telephone number of the office. This is really there so they can call Matt and complain about you, right? Just that, or in Jasmine's case, they can call Elaine and complain, right? That's the reason for that. So knowing that they're going to call and complain, I just leave that off. You put in your name, and let me just do that while I'm here. You put in your name, not mine. And the reason why we're doing this is, what happened to it? What happened to it? It was here, it went away. For some reason, my computer is really jumpy. All right, so here's, maybe I didn't do this, 00928162. I have more zeros in my number than you do. You put in your phone number. I haven't put in a fax number in a really long time. Right? I haven't gotten a fax in a really long time. You can put in I only usually put in a phone number, or one phone number, and then you put in your. Now, the reason that we're doing this, so one time we fill this out, right? One time we fill this out, and when we're done, we save it. And what we're doing is we're creating a template so that the next time we're writing an offer, there will be a next time, won't there? Right? And the next time we're writing an offer, you don't have to manually type out Keller Williams, Silicon City, and 2520 Mission College Boulevard, 3102, and you don't have to do that again, right? All you do is launch this template. Now, if we're doing a purchase agreement, one of the other forms that we would want is called the RPA, which is called the Residential Purchase Agreement. Notice it says 1215, and we're going to add that form. The residential purchase agreement already has a bunch of forms, already has a bunch of them. And so we can, it has agency disclosure, it has a whole bunch of different things. We might make some room. Are you coming? Maybe not. Maybe not. You don't have to come in if you don't want to. That's okay. I know she tried to get past the door, and I caught her. I saw it. So, and there's a handout in the middle. So the other thing that we're going to be adding to this as we go along. But one of the things that we might want to have is, let's see if they've, boy, I don't want that. I'm typing in inspections to see what comes up. Well, why don't we just go ahead from this? Now, so the reason that we're going to do a cover sheet and put in all of our information so we don't have to do that every time we write an offer. By the way, when we make a template for zip forms for the listing, guess what we're going to do? We're going to go to the listing office, we're going to put in our name and all of our information, then we're going to save that so we don't have to do it again. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go up here someplace, and I'm going to go down to, all right, where is the, someplace I have to go to save as. So where is that? List transactions, digital ink, learn more about it. I don't know. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and show you what, so this is the buyer template. And if I click on this little drop down, one of the choices you'll see is save as a template. By the way, if you've already written an offer and you've already gone through that whole process, you can pick that transaction and save it as a template. The thing is, they revised the forms in December. So I'm going to click save as a template. It says I'm going to leave all of that. Doesn't that look good? And then do not automatically apply this template to new transactions. That means I get to pick. In other words, I might not want to. So now that I've just done that, and later I could go back and add forms to the template if I feel like it. And now, since more people are here, the internet has slowed down. There we go. So I'm going to create a new transaction. I'm going to call this, is anybody, I don't know. How about Main Street sample, and we're going to say it's a purchase, it's residential. Notice now we have a template. And we're going to click on template, and we're going to click on save, and what it's now done is he likes to sit by the door so he can leave whenever it gets boring, which is usually a good fun. All right. So, all right, so what we've done is I put in my contact information, but I didn't put it all in because I'm lazy. But you're going to put in all of your contact information. You're going to save it. You're going to then go to the drop-down list and say save as a template, making it a template. So now when you do something, it'll all be here. All right. So the first thing you want to do, this will make your life a lot easier, as you open up the template. Notice it's got that information. And what you want to do is you're going to want to go to where it says MLS Connect. I don't actually have an MLS number right handy. Does anybody have an MLS number that you know of a property? I know. REIL.com. What about yours? Do you have you memorized the MLS number? I'm not. All right. Ready? All right, right. Just get wait. I was not anticipating such level of cooperation. So I'm going to go to MLS Connect, and one of the things I can see it's not set up, right? Which I'm not going to do right now because what is the MLS number? It is ML 815-22036. All right. Now it's probably not going to find it. We'll see. And then if it doesn't, I'm going to skip this part. Maybe I won't skip the part. I don't know. So you notice I put in ML first, and then I put in the number.
So you go in the template and then there's MLS Connect?
Yeah, it's up at the top. When it stops spinning around, I'll go back and show you where it is. This may not.
Oh, still waiting.
It's still, yeah. It was waiting for you. All right. What I'm going to do. See how I've lost. I need to get this to work. I've lost the internet connection again. This is the part. The hardest part of doing your class here is I can't believe it's doing this again. All right. We'll see if that works better. Oh well. So it doesn't look like I've got a strong enough connection to do this. But what you want to do is there any way I can make this stop? Not without turning everything off. It's always, so let's see if we can do, I'm starting over. I've connected to my hotspot to see if that works. This is one of those things that always works when I'm not in the room. And then when I'm in the room, it doesn't work. So what was missing was the MLS Connect. And I'm going to give this an attempt. This is not what does that have? Century 21. Wow, I better change that. And what we want to do is distressed property forms, open house forms. I don't see it right now, and I don't want to spend a lot of time looking for it. But what MLS Connect does is it allows us to import the information. So if we click on property, one of the choices is MLS Connect. Now, I know it's not working because up here, it should have an MLS ID. I mean, it should give us the MLS name. And you see, it's not giving me a drop down for the MLS name, but it should. But it's not doing it. What was your MLS number again? I'm just going to try it one more time. 815 22036. All right. Let's just see. And if it does this again, I'm giving up. So when you're at a place where you have a good internet connection, what you want to do, and you may have to Google this, how do you set up MLS Connect in zip forms? But you want to do this. And mine, it's doing it again. And the reason you want to do this is that what it will allow you to do is import all of the information about the property from the MLS rather than you having to manually type it in the template. That assumes, however, that it can connect. And here we are. All right. I'm going to just talk about the form because I don't know when this is ever going to connect. So, assuming you've done that, that's my biggest tip is get MLS to connect, fill out the worksheet first, and then it'll auto-populate the form. But We don't have that luxury right now. So this is what the current joint residential purchase agreement instructions 415. Let me see. That doesn't sound right. 1214. If I can't finish this because the internet won't let me, I will be not happy. All right. So notice it says CAR form RPA.CA revised 1215. Does everybody see that? So what I'm going to do is just go through how I would recommend that you fill this out. I'll make a video on MLS Connect when I'm bored, which I don't know when that is. So you put in the date prepared. Is that the date they're going to sign it?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. It's the date you're doing it. An offer from, you put in the name of the buyer. By the way, if you filled out the worksheet, this would all be auto-populating. Close of escrow shall occur on. You could put that in the form. By the way, all this stuff would be auto-populating if you filled out the worksheet. If we put in 45 days, the problem with that is that that's 45 days after acceptance, and we don't know when acceptance is, and we don't necessarily know when 45 days after acceptance is going to be. And if it happens to be on a Monday, as an example, it's going to cause a problem. Now, what it says later in the form is that if we put down 45 days and 45 days happens to be a Saturday or Sunday, the form says it automatically is rolled over to the next Monday, to the next business day. That's what it says. If it falls on a holiday, it's automatically rolled over to the next day. So that part isn't a problem, but the problem is that if we put down 45 days and it happens to be a Saturday or a Sunday, let's say it's a Saturday, and that means it actually rolls over on Monday. In order for the buyer to close on Monday, the loan is going to have to be funded on Friday. And that means the buyer is going to have to pay 2 days worth of interest when they don't get to be in the house. And if they find this out, they might object. They might object. And they say, I don't want to pay 2 days worth of interest because I don't get the house. Some people, I've had people say, I will not close this transaction because I'm not going to pay. You pay the 2 days worth. I'm not paying the 2 days worth of interest. So I don't like to schedule closings on Monday, right? Because they get all huffy. I also generally don't like to schedule them on Friday. And the reason I don't like to do it on Friday is if something goes wrong, we're back into doing it on Monday, and then they're going to be complaining that they don't want to pay the interest. So I like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because there's a little bit of wiggle room if something goes wrong. I always liked it in the middle of the week. I don't know if it's just because I had enough of them that went wrong, but you understand what I'm saying. Is it better? And by the way, let me see if we can get back. It's still... It didn't find it. So how about this? It didn't find the property. So I'm going to go back to documents. I'll do it with the live form just for fun.
Will the old one work?
I don't know. What do you mean an old one? What? My login isn't set up because I've changed it for, it's not set up for MLS Connect. That's the problem. Do I have your login?
Probably not, but I can give it.
Oh, wait a second. Then everybody would know, and you know what this group will do. They'll be logging in. So let me see. I might have yours. In which case, I'll start recording this all over
You
again.
have it.
There we go.
There.
All right. And look at all. Do you notice how many I have? And by the way, one of the reasons I have so many agents log in, and mine's kind of empty, is that I help agents with their contracts. I'm just saying. Right, because they give me the login and they say, help me with the contract. So I'm going to click on new, and we're going to apply. You have a purchase template.
I did.
You did? Wow. I'm surprised. So, well, no, I'm just, I'm always surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised. How about that? And so I'm going to click on this, and we're going to use Patrick's purchase template. Then I can critique it. And, I didn't know anyhow. So what do you have here? Well, he's got just about all the good stuff. Some of this, by the way, you don't need the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller because that's included. So the cover sheet, we're going to click on this and we're going to ask Roberta one more time what her, now notice this is what it's supposed to look like. It says MLS list And if you're a member, I've helped Maha once, and she's a member of like, seems like 8 boards. It's really not that many, but she's got a great big drop down list. Ours only works for MLS listings unless you've joined a bunch of other associations. So your MLS number again is
815-220-36.
I'm going to edit the first part of this out. Do you want to replace existing data with imported data? We click on yes. And then you must select a property. See, I did that on purpose just so you could see that it doesn't work unless you click on Find First. Right? I work in a number of these learning experiences. So here it is, Sunshine Place. And now that we've found it, I don't, including a property photo, this is so in case you have so many offers that are out there, you can't remember what the homes look like anymore. So we'll talk about that when you get there, and we say yes, and it says the MLS data has been successfully imported. Now, what that means is look at all the property information has been filled out, and Remax Star Properties, look at the listing broker information has been filled out. And if Patrick in his template had filled out all of the selling broker information and then saved that in the cover sheet, his information would be filled out. Does everybody understand how much this has reduced the amount of time it takes to write an offer? Right? So the MLS Connect fills out all their information. If we pre-filled all of our information, we're now ready to write an offer. Right? So what we need to add is the buyer information. And by the way, what we're going to go through this this would be the buyer name is Bobby Buyer. And the only information we're going to put here is bb@buyer.com. And you don't need to put in the buyer street address and all this other information. There was a Remax agent that was doing this thing where he would list the property at 50% of what its market value was so that he would get 100 offers. And then afterwards, he would go through and look at the purchase agreements for the buyer's contact information that was submitted with the offer. And then he would contact the buyers himself to ask them if they wanted to work with him instead of the person that they had worked with in the future. Right? Sounds like Michael's writing that down as a future tip. So I don't tell them where the buyer lives. Right? You understand? It does populate on the form, but I don't do that. Notice the seller information is automatically put in. We don't trip. The reason we want the buyer's email, this is really the only 2 things. I'm not going to tell them the buyer's home phone number or I'm not going to do any of that. And the email is because later when it comes time to, we could use digital ink. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of it. Right now, I'm only going to put in the name of the buyer, and I'll explain why. Right? Because I don't, and so the seller's information, the property information. So let's go to what can we fill out here? And by the way, it's better to do it here. The purchase price, this is the price offered. So what is the listing price on this? $1,099,888. That's a lucky number. So we're going to lowball them at $1 million. All right. And then notice it says purchase agreement date. We click on this date. Deposit amount. So the amount that you're going to put in the deposit, historically it has been 1 to 3% depending upon the kind of market. Right now it's generally 3%. And so what would 3% be of $1 million? Right, so we put in $30,000. If we don't put in, that's a little high. If we don't put in $30,000, and by the way, the calculator that pops up here really doesn't help you at all. So I don't know. If we don't put in 3%, what that means is what we're going to need is an increase in the deposit. So if the market ever goes back to where it was, which is more favorable to buyers, what we would typically do in that market is put a 1% initial deposit. And then when contingencies have been removed, we raise it to 3%. But in a multiple offer, we're in a seller's market, we would try to the goal is to put down 3% to begin with because it makes the offer look stronger. We don't have to worry about increases. So is everybody with me? If we were in a buyer's market and we put down 1, that would be $10,000. We would then be doing a $20,000 increased deposit, but we're not going to do that. The offer date, so the offer date is the date that we expect that we want to put on the contract for when the beginning of the offer is. So if I'm writing it now, but I happen to know that I'm not going to see the buyers or talk to the buyers, or they're not going to have any opportunity to look at this until tomorrow, I will put down tomorrow, right? Because there's a clock that's based upon the offer date, not the date prepared, but the offer date. And if I know the buyers aren't going to look at it tomorrow, I'm not going to put down today's date and have the clock start ticking. So usually it's the same date, but not necessarily. Could you see yourself, maybe you can't, at 11 o'clock at night writing up an offer to send to the buyers tomorrow?
Yes.
Right? So the purchase, don't call me. And by the way, I've had agents say, I don't like to call you too late at night. I have a thing on my phone that automatically turns it off, the ringer, at a certain time. If I see it ring and I answer it, it means I want to. If I don't want to, I won't see it. So you can call me. If you're writing an offer, I would rather you call me at night and ask me than show it to me in the morning and have me go, oh my God. So when is the expiration date? Although we can put this in, it sometimes doesn't auto-populate it. Let's see if it does in the new form. So if we're writing it on what is the default setting? If we don't put in another date, what does the purchase agreement say?
3 days.
For the date that how many days does the seller have to accept our offer? What is 3 days? Do we necessarily want to give them 3 days?
No.
Do they need 3 days to decide if our $1 million, is he going to need 3 days to decide if that's a good price? Probably not. He probably needs 3 minutes, right? They're going to look at it and say, now, or all right. But we might give them, so if we're making the offer on Friday, we might give them, I don't know, to Saturday, right? We might tighten it up. By the way, what is a preemptive offer? Does anybody know what that means?
For the last date of accepting offers.
So if they put in, all offers are going to be on Tuesday the 9th, does that mean it's illegal, unethical, or immoral to submit an offer before the 9th? No. Do you want to give them a whole lot of time to think about the offer? No, right? So a preemptive offer generally has a very tight rein on it. You get like till midnight tonight, right? But so we're going to give them to Monday because we're going to be nice about it. And the expiration time, we could type in whatever we want. Here, you'll see it doesn't always auto-populate. So we're going to give them until 5 o'clock p.m. We don't need to worry about a lot. One of the classes that I do, which I'm planning to charge for, is I print out the worksheet and I take a highlighter and I mark all the things that actually get populated. In other words, just because it's in the worksheet does not mean it actually appears anywhere in any form at all. This is something not everybody knows, because I've seen agents struggling to fill out every line in the worksheet, and I'm looking at it and I say, well, that doesn't go anywhere in any form. And then they ask me the obvious question, which is, why is it in the worksheet if it doesn't actually go in any form? And then I have to tell them one of these old person stories about how real estate agents used to print the worksheet out and carry it around with them and have it stapled to the back of this cardboard folder or inside, and would pull it out, and they would use it to keep all the information about the people and that sort of thing. But we have cell phones now, smartphones, and so we don't. And by the way, it's just an interesting thing. What goes through, what doesn't, right? So we don't need to worry about a lot of this stuff. So let's say we're okay. Right. By the way, if we know our lender is FHA or conventional, we could put the lender information, by the way, does not auto-populate anywhere either. Right. It just doesn't. Appraisal information doesn't auto-populate either. Neither does the title information necessarily. Let's see. The title information might. How about where the title is going to be with Old Reliable. Right. Old Reliable title. And we're going to let Old Reliable be the escrow officer too. All right. We'll just see what happens. So once I've filled out this form, we don't need to do a lot of this stuff either. Once I filled out the form and I click on save, now we're going to look at the purchase agreement itself. So we click on the little button that says back. How many of you know that virtually every week Zip Forms has free webinars on how to use their service? How many of you know that? They send you emails. How many of you have ever watched one of theirs on using the mobile app? Did you know that you could do one of these forms using an iPad or a tablet? Just that. So let's look at the residential purchase agreement. This will not take as long now because it's already filled in a bunch of stuff. So they give us this table of contacts. Agency, you need to check. Notice it has Bobby Buyer. You could put in the date, but if we use SkySlope, it actually has a very easy way of putting in the date too. It involves extra effort, right? Maybe when I'm done, I'll go to SkySlope and I don't know. But it involves a little bit extra effort. If we don't want, does everybody understand in SkySlope, there's a little button that you could click on and drag date signed into the field. That requires clicking on a button and dragging date signed into a field. If we click here, we could mark the date we think the buyer is going to sign it. What's the problem with us picking the date right now that the buyer is going to sign it? What if they don't? Right? You understand? What if they don't? So I generally leave that blank. Agent, notice it has, sorry to pick on Patrick, but since Patrick didn't fill out the selling agent part, it didn't auto-populate any of that information. So if you fill out all the agent part, it would have your name and your BRE number, and it would be right there right now, right? So you wouldn't have to type it out. We don't need to worry about this, so we're just going to go on. Notice down here, it would have auto-populated this, including the office BRE number and the agent's BRE number. It would do that. But enough picking on Patrick. He at least he had an MLS Connect that worked, which is more than I did. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. No, that's stand back. So notice how, hasn't it done it? Look at how much it's already filled out. I like to do this, click on that, and then wait. If I click on that and I put it in here, the cursor, it's going to give me a calendar. So over the years, I'm a lazy or efficient listing agent. And the reason that I would say that is because I don't want to have addendums later to change stuff. Or even as a selling agent, lazy or efficient, which means that if it comes on a Monday, is it likely that my buyers are going to want me to have an addendum to change the close of escrow to another day? First of all, is it also possible that the seller is going to say, no, we don't care, we like Monday, right? So now I'm hassling with the listing agent to get Monday accepted. Plus, I have to write an addendum to change the close of escrow date. I have to call the listing agent up. I have to talk to the listing agent, which is generally not a pleasant experience. I have to send them the addendum and have them, right? Do you understand? I don't want to do all that. So what I'd rather do is say, all right, what would 45 days look like? Well, that looks like 30. 45 would be around here. Why don't how about that? That looks like a nice day to me, right? A Wednesday, March 16th. Can you understand that if you actually pick a day to close escrow, that gives you a little more, I mean, we know we don't have to do more stuff to change it later, right? It's a nice day right in the middle. How would we pick that day? Who would we talk to if we represent the buyer in picking that day? Who would be the most important factor in whether or not we're going to close on that day? The lender. Would it be better for us to have the short or the longest close of escrow?
Shortest.
Shortest of the seller.
How about that? It's a trick question.
Based on the seller.
Based on the seller. There we go. Give the man a cookie. Should we have a chat with the listing agent about what the seller wants? What would make the seller happy? Is it possible the seller would like to have a longer close of escrow? Is it possible the seller wants to have a shorter close of escrow? My goal when I wrote up an offer is I wanted to write up an offer that the seller could accept without changing. I have heard agents express the idea that why don't we try and sneak stuff in and see if it'll just get past them and then we win. And I'm not assuming the listing agent is a moron and that I therefore would assume that they're going to see it and that they'll counter it or just throw my offer to the side and go with somebody else. And I wanted to write it so that it would be accepted. So I would talk to the seller, the listing agent first, and I would say questions like, so tell me, what does the seller want? How would I write up this offer so that the seller can just accept it? Tell me, what do you want? And by the way, listing agents generally will tell you that. They would like to close. Right. And then I would go to the lender and say, can we close on this day? And if the lender says yes, cool. Put that in. Right?
Are there legal limits? It's usually within 45 days, but if somebody wanted 50 days or something.
The question is, are there legal limits? No, there's no legal limits. An escrow could be for any period of time. Some of them have gone on for a really long. I've had an escrow go on for almost a year. Right? They were suing each other. Arbitration got involved, and lawyers, and they were, it's just.
1031 exchange.
Well, the 1031 exchanges don't go on that long. You have 45 days to identify, but 180 days to close. You don't do that, though, right? So what we're also going to do, RE/MAX Star Properties, we want to check those. So going along. So first of all, you understand why it might be better to pick a date rather than just write in 30 days from acceptance. Then disclosure here, notice that box is already checked. RE/MAX is the seller exclusively. And again, if we'd filled out our selling agent portion, it would say KW Silicon City right here. And we would say the buyer exclusively, or both the buyer and seller if KW Silicon City was also the listing agent. If it's KW Silicon Valley, is it a dual agency? If it's another Keller Williams franchise, not this one, is it dual agency? And the answer is no. No, because they have a different broker's license. And by the way, Jasmine, just for you, the three offices that Mike Sibilia is the broker all have three different BRE numbers. So even if you were writing an offer on the Campbell or Gateway office, even though Mike Sibilia is the broker at all three, it's three different broker licenses, and there's no dual agency. I just thought I would throw that. She came all the way from Santa Cruz to be in my class, Aptos. So I thought I would share that with her. Three different broker numbers, right? So it's not dual agency, even though the person is the same person. And so, Lupita, you can sit here, but you're required to drink. I know. That's why no one else has sat down. That belongs to you. So we've done. So is everybody with me? And again, fill out the form in advance, and it would auto-populate this. Finance terms, we put down the $30,000 for the deposit. The default setting is electronic funds transfer. Some old agents want to see a copy of the check, right? I don't know why, right? And actually, I do know why. It all got started back in the REO days because the banks wanted to see a copy of the check. But this isn't an REO. Is this an REO? No, it's not a bank-owned property. And what I'll tell you, the listing agents, my perspective as a listing agent is a Xerox, is a copy, a photocopy of a piece of paper. Does that have any actual meaningful significance?
No.
Could you write out a check for $10 million, walk over to the copy machine, make a copy of it, and forward it to somebody? All right. So and sometimes, however, the listing agent's going to have a bunch of instructions, and one of the things they're going to want to see is a copy of the check. Right? Yes.
So now they're starting to have new software and more technology about being able to take a check and actually deposit that check
Right.
from your phone.
I know, I do that too.
Okay, so is that going to impact this at all?
No, not at all, not yet. So if the listing agent is a Neanderthal, then they're going to want to see a copy of the check. So what you do is you have a copy of the check, but what you also need to do is to take a Sharpie out. You could do this, and you can do this with a phone. You can take a picture of the check, but you want to block out, or delete the routing number and the account number. Can you see any disadvantage to sending a real estate agent that you don't know or met a complete facsimile of your client's check, including the routing number, the account number, and a sample of their signature? What could go wrong? Right? I mean, what could go wrong with that? So do you understand, if you do give them a check, you want to not include that? And by the way, how many of you feel like you should follow the contract the way it is written? How many of you agree with that? Right? If it says you're supposed to do it in the contract, you ought to do it. Look what it says at the bottom of paragraph 3 down here. Deposit checks given to agent shall be an original signed check and not a copy. I'm not kidding. That's what it says. So if you want to be a stickler, you're not supposed to give them a photocopy of the check. You're supposed to actually give the other agent the check. How many of you want to give the other agent your buyer's check? No, I wouldn't either, right? So I would, by the way, this is just ignored by most agents because the listing agent is going to say, I want to see a photocopy of the check because they don't know any better, right? But it says electronic funds transfer. You do not want the check. Let me just be clear on this. You do not want the check. If you actually are in possession of the check, you're supposed to bring it to the office, show it to the market center administrator. They're going to sigh, roll their eyes, shake their head, and then find the book to write in the information. I've always thought it was much better for my client to keep their own check. Okay? And then if something goes wrong, by the way, an agent at the Campbell office, I believe it was, lost her real estate license. And the manner in which it occurred is she had a check. She was holding the check. Offer was accepted. The next morning, I've unfortunately had this happen, but not with this whole thing. The next morning, the buyer called up and said, I've changed my mind. We don't want to buy the house. So offer was accepted today, and tomorrow morning, the buyer says, I want to cancel. I want out. Now, she hadn't deposited the check yet. The agent hadn't deposited the check yet. Can you easily cancel a contract in the first couple of days?
Yeah.
Sure. So the agent gives back the check to the buyer. And the seller complained to the Bureau of Real Estate, and the Bureau of Real Estate revoked the agent's real estate license.
Wow.
Because the Business and Professions Code says that once the offer has been accepted, the check belongs to the seller and cannot be returned to the buyer without the seller's express written permission. That's what the Business and Professions Code says, and the agent had her license revoked for giving the check back to the buyer after acceptance. Now, if the buyer had their own check, is the buyer regulated by the California Business and Professions Code? No. Can they tear it up and do whatever they want to with it? Do you have any control over that? No. Right, and can the buyer then go to the title company, escrow company, and give them the check themselves? Get a receipt. Doesn't that sound cleaner? By the way, if they don't have the ability to drive down there, do you know that most escrow companies would send somebody out to pick it up for them?
Yeah.
Right. So don't take the check. Right? Is that
Clear.
yeah? There's nothing but bad things that are going to happen. Increased deposit, we did 3%. All cash offer, click there if it's an all cash offer. Otherwise, don't. By the way, attached is a verification of sufficient funds. That's the default setting. If you don't have proof, then you click this box and write in how many days. First loan, if we had filled this out, by the way, on the other form, it would auto-populate it. Right. In other words, if we knew what the amount was going to be, it would have auto-populated it. I didn't do that because I don't know. I just didn't do it. So if it's an 80% loan, that would be $800,000. Where would you get this information from? Ooh, a little too many zeros. How about the lender? And by the way, the lender should be able to give you, I doubt that this will be FHA. I actually had an agent write one that was like an $800,000 loan and they had checked FHA. And I was like, because what's the maximum amount of you can do with FHA?
649,500.
What's the maximum FHA loan? I think it's 525. 529?
529.
Yeah. But you could buy up to, depending on, so, but the idea is, it's not $800,000 loan is not going to be FHA. So the default is conventional. If there's seller financing, you got to talk to me or somebody before you fill this out. I helped an agent do this just the other day. Assumed financing, I don't believe it. The loan shall be at a fixed rate not to exceed. Now there's differences of opinion about this particular spot. If I know that the lender says 4 1/4 and I'm sneaky, I might put in a little under that because it'll give us an out because I put in an interest rate that I know that it doesn't exist. However, I'm assuming the listing agent doesn't know what interest rates are and won't notice that I put in an interest rate too low. If I don't put in anything, which is what I see a lot of agents doing, but it's basically saying that interest rate is not a factor. So if interest rate were to spike and go up to 5, they still have to buy the house if they can qualify. So why don't we put in 4.25 just for, I don't know, laughs. And points, you can't put in 0. See, watch what happens. It went away. It went away. But I can put in 0.01. I can do that, but I can't put in 0. If I don't put in anything, is it possible, this isn't a big deal, but if interest rates go up, there's something called a buy down where you can pay points up front to lower the interest rate. And it sometimes becomes a stickler as to whether or not they could have done that and gotten the loan. So if they say no points, I might put that in. I might leave it blank. Loan contingencies aren't as important as they used to be. If there's a second loan and we click on this, it's going to have what's it going to do? It's going to ask a little bit about that. If we say FHA or VA, there's an FHA and VA amendatory clause, which automatically gets added to the contract. One of the new things they do, if you click on it, is automatically added to the contract. Additional financing terms, I am often asked, what do we write in here? And my answer is, you shouldn't be writing anything in here. If people say, then I get asked, well, then why do they have that space on the form if I shouldn't be writing anything in there? And I don't know. I guess if you really pressed me, I could think of something. But just because there's a blank space doesn't mean you need to write anything in. Verification of down payment. Notice what it says. The default is that you've got it. Well, actually, we click on this. The default, I'm sorry, I said that wrong, is 3 days. You should be clicking on verification attached if you want the offer accepted. Appraisal and contingency removal. Is it going to be a stronger offer if appraisal is not a contingency?
Yes.
What happens if it doesn't appraise?
You're busted.
You're busted. So, right. So the problem, this is the way the conversation might need to go. We're making an offer for $1 million. What if it doesn't? So you'd say to the buyer, well, what if it doesn't appraise for $1 million? Let's say it appraises for 950. How about 900? And I'll make it small. $980,000. What that'll mean is, if we have appraisal as a contingency, it means you don't have to buy the house and you can renegotiate the price. That's the good news. The bad news is it means that you don't have to buy the house and you can renegotiate the price. And then the seller is going to be less likely to accept your offer. Did everybody get what I just said? If we put appraisal as a contingency and it doesn't appraise, the good news for the buyer is you don't have to buy the house and you can renegotiate the price. But then the seller, the bad news is less likely to accept your offer because they know you can renegotiate the price. So if we click on not a contingency, that makes the offer look a lot stronger. But what it means is that it doesn't appraise, you have to make the difference up in cash. So let's say it was $980,000 was the appraised value of your $1 million purchase. That means you're going to need to, in addition to the down payment, kick in another $20,000. Could you do that? Let's say they say yes. All right, cool. What happens if the appraisal comes in at $960,000 and you're going to need $40,000? Would you be willing to do that? Now, after I've done this like 3 times, they get where I'm going, and they'll say 50 grand's it. No more than that, right? Does it do your clients a service to have them not be able to buy the house because they don't have enough money because of the difference of the appraisal and the selling price, and then lose the deposit because they don't have enough money? Does anybody any good? No. So one of the other offices that I was at, there was an agent talking about how happy she was with the buyer's agent because the buyer's agent had marked no contingency and it was an $80,000 differential. And she had never mentioned it to the buyers, but was such a good agent, she convinced them to go along with it anyhow. And my reaction to hearing this story is this is not a definition of a good agent. You understand, if you're representing the buyer, you ought to have this discussion. Is it possible? By the way, should you know the comps and know whether or not it's going to appraise for $1 million, but we're not appraisers, so we don't know for sure. Should you know how far they're willing to go to buy how bad do you want to buy this house? Are you willing to throw in 50 grand in addition to the down payment, 100 grand? What's the cutoff? Now, let's say they say 50. That's it. We can write a clause that says in the contract, the property must appraise for a minimum of $950,000. Does that, by the way, an agent I helped do this, she's not here today, but in the coaching program, got one of these accepted just last week. Do you understand, as a listing agent, is this better than a firm contingency? Yeah. Because I might know the comps and I might say to the seller, it's going to appraise for more than $950,000. And what I would tell the listing agent is they don't have any more money than this. Right? Countering isn't going to help. If it doesn't appraise for $950,000, they're not going to be able to buy the house. I'm telling you, right? Do you understand why you need to have this conversation at this point and find out what are they willing to do? If they say it has to appraise, we don't have any extra money, can they still buy the house? It's been on the market 45 days. Right. So do you understand that how long the home has been on the market is going to probably determine how flexible the seller is going to be on contingencies? I helped another agent write an offer yesterday on a property that's been on the market like 160 days. We included all the contingencies. Right? You understand? They got the whole group, all of them for 17 days because, what are they going to do? Right? But if it's only been on the market for 10 days and they're taking offers on Tuesday and the listing agent says, I got 8 already, then you have to have a conversation with the buyer. How bad do you want to own this house? Right? Isn't that right? Loan applications, notice you should be checking letter attached. By the way, it's better that the letter is not 1 or 2 sentences. As a listing agent, I would look at some of these letters and I would shake my head because I could tell this wasn't a real pre-approval letter. What a lot of loan agents did is they changed their software to say pre-qualification to say pre-approval. But they haven't, what a good pre-approval should have is conditions. Conditions like what is left to be checked. As a listing agent, I would like to see those conditions. Right? By the way, what could you do besides having a good pre-approval letter that would make this a more acceptable with the seller? Underwriting, desktop underwriting, or send it to the underwriter. Does everybody understand what that means? So desktop underwriting, it's called something else with Freddie Mac, but anyhow, it's submitted to the underwriter in advance, so the underwriter is already blessed done the ceremony, sprinkled the holy water on the file, and said it appraises and you get the loan.
Yeah, it gives you permission.
And it gives you the conditions, right? And as a listing agent, I like to see that because now I knew we had a real pre-approval. What else could you do to make the listing agent happier with your buyer's financing?
Show them the money.
Show them the money. Well, we have that marked. Would it be advantageous if your loan agent was willing to, and in fact would, call the listing agent and chat with them?
That's a must.
A must. Not all, they don't always do that. If I'm the listing agent, do I feel more confident when Carl calls and says, and I can then say to Carl, have you submitted underwriting? Tell me, what are the commissions? The conditions. And if Carl says, well, I haven't gotten their tax returns yet, and I haven't seen their down payment, and that's not a pre-approval, right? You understand? So would it be better if your loan agent was actually willing to reach out to the listing agent and chat with them about what a great client you had? Loan contingency is we're going to talk about loan contingency removal. And in 21 days, the reason it used to be 17, they moved it to 21 because of TRID, right? The new laws, TRID stands for the Truth in Lending Disclosures, TRID. I always thought truth in lending was, never mind, I'm not going to say it. I have a cynical comment, but anyhow.
They call it know before you owe now.
All right, know before you owe. So it says 21 days because it takes longer. No loan contingency. Notice it says if buyer does not obtain the loan as a result and does not purchase the property, they may be entitled to the buyer's deposit or other legal remedies. So you could lose your deposit. Does it make it look better if you don't have a loan contingency? It had better have been submitted to underwriting. By the way, and I've had lenders who've submitted an underwriting that said you can say there's no loan contingency. I had one guy say, I'll put in the deposit if that's the reason, there's no loan contingency. But that means they've actually sent the form into the IRS and gotten the verification, which sometimes, do you understand that's a dangerous thing to do?
Very dangerous.
Very dangerous to do. But again, you're having the conversation, how bad do you want to buy this house? They could lose their deposit. Buyer stated financing. What this paragraph actually says, although it doesn't say it in maybe as plain of language as you might like, is that as long as the buyer gets financing and is able to close the transaction, it's okay. I think in baseball, it's no harm, no foul. So it says, however, seller is relying on buyer's representation of the type of financing specified, including but not limited to the amount of down payment, contingent or non-contingent. Now, what sometimes people will do is they'll make an all-cash offer. Does that look good?
Yeah.
Right, but that's not an all-cash offer. So they prove they have the cash, but then what they actually do is go get a loan. It happens it happens a lot. Do you understand if your buyer has the cash and is willing to show it and check the box, all cash, no loan contingency, now they can buy the house if they wanted to, but is it okay for them to go out and get a loan? And the answer is yes, as long as they close on time. By the way, one of the issues is if you have no appraisal contingency, which is then the seller is not obligated to let your appraiser in. Unless you sneak them in. You don't. Does everybody understand what I just said? If you say all cash, but then no appraisal contingency, technically the seller is not obligated to let your appraiser in. Right? Now, they oftentimes don't know. You say, we're doing inspections on this day, and one of the inspectors happens to be the appraiser, right? But you're taking a risk. It says here the seller has agreed to specific closing. Seller has no obligation to cooperate with buyer's efforts to obtain any financing. other than that specified in the agreement, and the availability of such alternative financing does not excuse the buyer from the obligation to purchase the property and close escrow as specified. Now, what that's actually saying is that as long as you can close escrow when specified, you're okay. Does a 20% down look better than 10
Yes,
or 3?
yes.
Supposing somebody could qualify for an 80% loan, has 20% down, and you wrote the offer that way, are they allowed under this paragraph to go for 10% down?
Okay, so,
I guess so, as long as they close on time. Is it possible for them to have 80% down and eventually get a 10% second? As long as they close on time. Right? Does everybody see what I don't know if I should be recording this, but this is one of the guys that I used to coach in Campbell used to refer to this as the dark arts, right? But do we want to write the offer so that it gets accepted?
yeah.
If they have the cash and are willing to show it, is this going to make it much more likely to get accepted? My all cash buyer, by the way, always had a equity line that he would use to fund it, right? It wasn't a purchase money loan, but he always just got a loan to fund it, to rehab it and then to sell it, right? It was just written into the cost, but we knew that by checking all cash, no loan contingency, it looked a lot better. So about appraisal, and let's say this is just, I'm wandering around a little bit now. Supposing it's a fixer-upper. It's in trouble, right? It's in bad shape. A lot of work to be done. Making a contingent offer, we're going to have a property inspector, termite inspector, a roof inspector, a chimney inspector, and a foundation inspector, and then we'll let you know whether or not we want to buy it. Do you understand? I used to sell a lot of fixer-uppers. That's not going to fly. You're not going to ever get the fixer-upper. So what would you need to do if you're making an offer on the fixer-upper?
Right, as is condition.
As is, but how do you know what that is? You need a contractor to go look at the property before you make an offer. You need somebody whose job is to bid work, who can, and by the way, sometimes it takes a couple hours, right? You need somebody who can walk through the property and say, it's going to cost so much to replace that, it's going to cost so much to do this, it's going to cost so much to do that, and could give a bid at that moment to do the work. Now, can you structure an offer that doesn't have an inspection contingency?
Yeah.
Right? Because in a sense, you already did it. So if it's a fixer-upper and it's going to require work, you need a contractor to look at it before you write an offer, because there's no way you're going to get you understand, if you're saying we want to figure it out afterwards, and I've already had a contractor look at it and bid the work out, and my investor knows what price he's willing to offer, I'm going to get it and you're not. Right. Sale of buyer's property, good luck with that. Right. Sometimes, by the way, I've had this work when they were buying property in another state and they needed to sell it. But anyhow, we don't have to, just because there's boxes here, we don't have to check them. So probate and trust advisories and short sales are only if it's that. Court confirmation is something that you would do if it involves like a probate that requires court confirmation. The statewide buyer and seller advisory, you need to know that if you check a box, it's going to automatically add the form to the group. So what that would mean is I don't add that form to my template anymore. I wouldn't, because first of all, most good listing agents already have that form filled out as part of the disclosures.
So you don't need both sides to fill it out?
No.
Just one?
Well, no, you need both sides to sign it.
Right, but you don't have to have two.
You don't need 2 copies. So if the listing agent has provided it in the disclosures, you just get the buyer to sign it. You don't need to do a new form. If I click on this, it's going to add the form. And if the seller already has the form signed, it'll annoy the listing agent that I'm giving him another copy of the form to ask his clients to sign. It just annoys them.
Yep.
Right? So you want to get all the, by the way, should you go through the inspections and disclosures before you write the offer or wait till the next week?
Before.
Before.
Available.
if they're available, because what the law essentially says is that anything you knew about when you made the offer, you can't then complain about later. So anyhow, so you want to read the other terms, you can write in other terms here. Again, just because there's no reason that you have to write something in just because it's blank. Inspections, reports, and certificates. Notice it says it only determines who's going to pay, it does not determine who's going to do the work. So if the listing agent should have a copy of the natural hazard disclosure already, I would look to see if they have an environmental. If I represent the buyer, I would suggest that they get one. By the way, if I was a listing agent, I would get the seller to get one. Because as a listing agent, my theory was I did not want the transaction to not close. I didn't want that. And if we don't have an environmental, then what that means is the buyer might get one, and then the buyer might find something. Does everyone understand what the environmental is? It looks for environmental hazards that are located around the area. That would be like an abandoned gas station or a paint store or dry cleaners, things. And so might that affect whether or not somebody wants to buy it?
Yes.
Right. So if they don't have one, so you could say, and by the way, if they already have one, you don't need to check the seller's going to pay for it. Do you understand? You don't need to. But if they don't have an environmental, could you say buyer is going to pay for an environmental? Right? If it's my listing, you'll see that they probably have all of them. Other reports, you don't need to write them in, but there could be things. I've had radon gas inspections. I've had asbestos inspections. There's a whole bunch of things you could do.
But that's a double sword because the lender sees it on the contract
Right.
and they want it.
You generally don't want to check a lot of this stuff. Right. But an environmental. So retrofit, typically you click on this. However, some people will say don't click on click on buyer. This, by the way, in Santa Clara County is not a big deal. Seller shall pay for smoke alarms, carbon monoxide installation, and water heater bracing if required by law. Sometimes do they want you to do it anyhow?
Yeah.
But even if not, the appraiser wants it done whether it's required by law. So the law basically says this is a point of sale requirement and it's supposed to be done when it's sold, but there is no reason. It doesn't cost very much. So who's going to pay for minimum mandatory government inspections and reports? There aren't any right now in Santa Clara County. If you leave it blank or click on buyer, who cares? Seller shall pay for the cost of compliance with other mandatory minimum retrofit. There really aren't any in Santa Clara County. Santa Cruz, by the way, does have some. Santa Cruz has some involving shower heater and the shower and the toilet low flow. Santa Cruz has one. And if you sell the property, you have to meet that one. Pacifica too. Right. I'm just saying Santa Clara County doesn't have one. Right? But if you're in a different county, might you want to find out or just say I'll buy. Again, if this property's been on the market for a long time, I'm checking all those boxes. If there's 8 offers, I might just check those boxes. Right? Do you understand? We want to. So seller shall pay the escrow fee. Notice it put in old reliable if it's in Santa Clara County. Does anybody know where you would find who pays what in other counties? Prelim. Title company. It's midnight. It's 11 o'clock at night and I'm writing the offer.
Who pays who? Google it.
Who pays who? Google it.
Santa Clara County stuff.
I'm going to go to CHICAGO title transfer tax, Chicago Title Transfer Tax, which is actually a website called Chicago Title Transfer Tax and .com. And once I've clicked on it, Chicago Title, God bless them, are going to give me a list of all the counties in the state and tell me who pays the city tax, who pays the county tax, and typically who pays buyer and escrow fees. Chicago Title Transfer Tax.com. I can figure it out without. So where are we now? Why are we here? How
That's
much?
expensive.
All right. So we've done that, and seller shall pay. This is what we would do here. Who pays for the county transfer tax in Santa Clara County?
Well,
Who's customarily? What's it going to say? No, that's the city.
Oh, that's just, yeah, next.
The city is this, and I usually put in SPLIT 50/50 after I had somebody say, well, it didn't say 50/50. And so we wanted 60/40, right? So anyhow, homeowner association dues, transfer fees. If it's a homeowner association, typically that's what you would do. Private transfer fees might be in the prelim. A private transfer fee, some places, the Sierra Club did this thing where they basically got some subdividers to agree that every time they sell one of the properties that Sierra Club got a bonus, and it's a private transfer fee. And so you just have to, there aren't a lot, but you know. And then buyer, who's going to pay the home warranty? Seller or buyer could. If it was my listing, it probably already has one. If it's my listing, it probably already has one with seller's coverage. And let's say not to exceed, what's a typical home warranty?
$495. The premium is $425.
$495.
Used to be 300 before.
$495?
Yeah, if it's a condo, it's $295.
If it's a condo,
Which one we talking about? The one that's got,
Overpowered title.
By the way, my buyer consultation would have a folder, and what I might do at 2:00 today is actually go through how to make a marketing piece for a touch campaign. Right? I know I talked about buyer consultation, but I would have a folder with my buyer consultation in it, and included in the folder would be the environmental hazards book. Where I would have home warranty brochures, 3 of them. I would have my favorite lender and maybe a couple of others brochures. And I would have, how many of you have a copy of a home buyer's consultation right now ready you could give to somebody? How many of you have 3 of them that you carry with you? They're in your car. You would have them at your open house. If somebody said, I'm interested in talking to you about buying a house, you could just, in your car, pull out one of the buyer consultation packages and you're ready to go. How many of you are? Really? Yeah. Would that be better?
Yes.
Well, would that be a good idea? And should you, there's a home warranty is going to come in and talk because I want one too. Should you read somewhat thoroughly a couple of home warranty brochures to see what's covered and what's not covered? Yeah.
is the one where it covers the agent on fault better than the one that doesn't? I can't remember the.
NCRE, over public.
So many of the home warranty companies will cover part of an agent's deductible for errors and omissions insurance if you use them. Some real estate brokers will waive the deductible if you do everything that's on the list they have, including getting a home warranty. And the reason is because the errors and omissions insurance companies have found that properties with home warranties resulted in less litigation than those that did not. By the way, this is how I would get sellers to pay for it during the listing. Already have one in place. Because I would ask the seller, well, how do you feel about going to small claims court after the transaction's closed? You looking forward to that? Sound like a good thing? When it's over, would you like it to just be over and not have a lawsuit? And I would explain to them, the errors and omissions insurance companies that cover us will actually pay our deductible or part of it if we have a home warranty on the property. Do you have any idea why they would do that? And eventually they figure out, well, because there's probably less chance of a lawsuit with a home warranty. Right. Would you like there to be less chance of a lawsuit when you sell your home? Yes. Great. Why don't we start the home warranty now? And it covers you. This is called seller's coverage. It covers the seller during the listing period. So if something breaks, it's covered. So let's say $400 issued by, do you have a favorite home warranty company? Fidelity. Old Republic. Or if you don't know,
Old American title.
Old American title. I don't know if that's, anyhow. Could we say buyer's choice?
Yeah.
Could you do that? Could you pick some upgrades? Would it be a good thing to know
Yes.
what they are? All right. So whoever pays for it, I generally didn't pay for home warranties and stuff. I know people say I always pay for the home warranty for my clients. Okay. Right? Why do you do that? Well, because the home warranty company gave me these things to hand out that said I'll pay for the home warranty. And so I thought that would be a good thing. So I've been giving it to people, so I pay for the home warranty. And I was like, oh, that's nice. Right, $400, $500, that's nice. Are you going to give them a closing gift too? Yeah, that's right. So we're up to what, 900, a grand? Really? How much? I don't know. So, I don't know. So, items included in sale, you ought to read through this list. I'm going to do a few more minutes of this. This is where a lot of fighting occurs. So, if there's anything that's even questionable, you're going to want to write it down. So, I sold a townhouse in Willow Glen, and they had this, I didn't really like it, but from Santa Cruz you'd appreciate it, a driftwood candelabra, right? Holds candles, driftwood. And it looked kind of like a rickety thing. It was pretty big. So they had it bolted. They had like a little wire that went around it and a little bolt so that it was attached to the wall. So the buyer moves in. I'm the listing agent. Buyer moves in. Guess what? It's gone. So they called me up to complain. The buyer's agent did. And I said, yeah, so it's gone, He said, well, they can't take it. They have to give it back or pay us. I said, no, it's not included. And look at the list. And so he's looking at the list. So what I said immediately was, it's a decoration. It's a decoration. And he said, well, it's bolted to the wall. So who cares? If I had an original Monet, I would probably have it bolted to the wall. Does that mean you get it when you buy the house? No, you don't get it. It's a decoration. And then he looked at the contract and he said, it's a lighting fixture. He tried to claim that the candle holder was a form of lighting fixture. And so guess who ended up probably buying the buyer
The agent.
The agent might have. So do you understand, if you represent a buyer and there's something like that, mirrors, do you know that some mirrors are actually hanging on a hook? Right? They're hanging on a hook that you can just take off. Do you want to go down to Home Depot and buy your client a mirror? Probably not. So did you understand, if there's anything, an agent that I worked with, buyer moves in the backyard was a cement bench to sit in. Well, to look at the backyard. It was gone. Cement desk. Is it? And so we were going around. They can't take it. I said, patio furniture. Right. And he's like, do you get the seller's patio furniture?
Unless
Yeah. So does everybody understand? You want to be, if you don't want to buy stuff, leased or liened items. Now they've made some modifications here. Solar panels.
you need to look at the lease.
There might be a lease and there might be a lien on it. You may find this hard to believe. When I first heard it, I thought it was hard to believe. But the companies that lease and have liens on the solar panels are sometimes fussier as to the qualification for those leases and liens than your loan company is going to be for you buying the home. In other words, there are a bunch of people that can be pre-approved to buy a home and get an $800,000 loan, but the solar company won't let them own the solar panels.
They don't approve.
Right? They don't approve them. They're fussier than the home lenders are. So will that cause a problem?
Yes.
Yeah. Buyer, look at this. Buyer's ability to assume any such lease or willingness to accept the property subject to any such lien or encumbrance is a contingency in favor of buyer and seller as specified in paragraph 14B and C. By the way, one of the things that you ought to do, this is just for fun, is get a copy of the contract and find every place in the contract it uses the word contingency. Buyer's acceptance of the condition of the property and any other matters relating to the property is a contingency of this agreement. Buyer's acceptance of the title of the property is a contingency of the agreement. Buyer's acceptance of the homeowner association documents is a contingency of the agreement. All right? Would it be a good thing for you to know what all of them are? This, by the way, is a contingency of the agreement. Seller represents that all the items included as otherwise owned by the seller and shall be transferred free and clear, except items excluded. Now, this bottom thing, this is where you could write, the seller says you don't get the chandelier, you don't get that. This is fun. Brackets attached to walls, floors, or ceilings for any such component, furniture, or item shall remain in the property or shall be removed when holes and other damage repaired. So is it likely that the seller is planning on keeping their big flat screen TV they've got hanging in the wall in the family room?
Yep.
Is it attached to the wall?
Yes.
And by the way, does it say anything here about flat screen TVs?
Yes, right there.
What does it say?
Excluded from the sale.
Really? It says, unless otherwise specified, the following items are excluded from the sale: audio and video as flat screen TV, speakers, and other items. So what about the brackets? Is the seller going to likely want them?
Yes.
Okay. So either the seller has to leave the brackets. Does the buyer necessarily want the brackets? Not necessarily. If they're left and the buyer doesn't want them, the buyer has to pull them out of the wall. They're not going to be. Are they going to be happy about that? They're not going to be happy about that. By the way, do they remember the good things about the transaction or the bad things? The bad. They remember the bad things. So
I have a question.
yeah.
I have like furniture that's been, we have like brackets on it to
Yeah.
attach it to the wall because for safety of the kids. So
Right.
they don't fall over and stuff. So that would have to go there, like if we were.
It doesn't actually mention furniture attached to the wall. It doesn't actually mention that. But you would want to make it clear as to what's included and what's not included. And by the way, I didn't read it, but it's here. Let me say, right here, items listed as included or excluded in the MLS flyers or marketing materials are not included in the purchase price or excluded from the sale unless specified in paragraph 8B or C. Doesn't matter what they put in the MLS.
Really? No, that's not gonna fly.
What do you mean it's not going to fly? You're going to write the California Association of Realtors?
No, but if it's in the MLS, they can get you for misrepresentation.
Why?
Because if you're saying there's a spot and you don't put it there and the spot.
So you're saying that the listing agent is responsible if the seller changes their mind? Is the listing agent responsible for the seller changing their mind?
Before signing the contract?
Is the listing agent responsible if the seller changes their mind?
I guess so.
No. If you lie in the MLS or deliberately misrepresent something, but is it possible for the seller to say at that price you're not getting the spot?
Oh, we had a case with an air conditioning, and they put air conditioning.
Well, this, by the way, is a new addition in December of 2015, right? Actually, I lied. That was included in December 2014. Just saying, find an old contract. It was there last year. But do you understand that what is this saying? Is it the MLS that's important? Is it the flyer that you got at the open house that's important? Or is it what's in this list here? Right? So, and by the way, if you don't want it included, you just make sure it's on this list. Right? But furniture that is attached is not on this list. By the way, one of the things an agent asked me, I want to get good at the purchase agreement. We are going to have I call it a workshop or something. I call it a clinic, I think, because because some of you will get sick when we do it. And so I called it a clinic. Is you need to be able to explain this agreement to other people. And my suggestion is that you read it aloud. If you have somebody that you don't like, you can tell them that you want to practice on them.
Read it to your kids at night.
You should read this aloud so many times, like every week. Every day, read a page. Every week, read it aloud until you're sick of it and you know where everything is. I can find stuff pretty quickly in this contract. Do you ever think someone's going to say, where is the thing about smoke detectors? And if it takes you 10 minutes to find it,
You
know.
lost them.
right? And they're like, this. All right, so read it. And by the way, I made a joke about what is it that brokers and coaches and people that teach agents about real estate transactions are really paid to do. What's the difference between us and the typical real estate agent? And the answer is we actually have read the agreement carefully. All right, that's it. That's about it. Virtually every question I get asked is in the contract. All right, virtually everything. And I know that most real estate agents have never really read it. I know that. They know how to fill them out a little bit. So what else should we do? It's 12:27. So we've made it all the way to page, I guess this is page 4. Yeah. So why don't we do this? We're going to stop now. And next week we're going to finish it. And most of the good stuff, by the way, is in the beginning. Right? The first couple of pages have most of the fun stuff. There's some pages that there really isn't very much. What I would recommend that you do is you read this and ask, and I call this reverse thinking or thinking backwards. If you were a buyer and you were looking at this, what questions would you have? Right? If you were in the shoes of a buyer, what questions would you have? Either about what we've covered or about what we're going to do next week. And why don't you bring them? And you could ask me, right? We could try that. Say, well, what about this? What about that? You could do that because being able to explain this, and by the way, you need to be able to explain this upside down,
Yes.
right? Otherwise, what are you going to do? Sit between them? I mean, when you think about it, the practical thing, you're going to be sitting here, you're going to be pushing the contract at them, and what you need to be able to do is to point to the different paragraphs and say, this means this, and this means that, and this means this, and this means that. You understand? Cool. Let's look at the next page, right? And be able to do that and give them a pen, let them hold it, and say, initial here, great, initial here, great, and all the way through the end. You need to be able to do that. If you can't get people to sign stuff, it's very hard to make money in real estate. It's a theory I have.
No.
So 2:00, we're going to do a marketing piece. I may need to use Patrick's login, but we'll do a marketing piece. Is that okay? Something that you ought to be sending out, right, this month in real estate. Should I do a Santa Cruz version?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 o'clock today.
2:00.